And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers bounce back from the debacle in Durham by beating Morehead State 92-59. It was thorough domination from the Hoosiers at home, and a really solid performance, the kind of performance that Indiana needed coming back off of that Duke loss. I know, as a lot of people are going to say, it's at home. This is not a top 100 opponent, and all of those caveats do apply. But this was still a really important and impressive win for Indiana because they passed the eye test, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Just how the Hoosiers looked, especially in that first half, was exactly what you want to see from a team coming back off of a rough performance like they had against Duke. I'm your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined tonight by Ryan Phillips and Will DeWitt. Andy Bottoms is at his company Christmas party, so we hope that he's having a pleasant time there. But the three of us will be here to take you through and talk about Indiana's victory tonight. I do want to remind you, if you're not already, get on our email list. It's assemblycall.com/subscribe. We send a post-game email after every single IU game, and I got more replies to our Duke email than we've gotten to any other email that we've sent. Part of that is because the list is growing quite large now, and the other part is just that game opened up a lot of a lot of wounds, I think, for Hoosier fans, and I appreciate all of your comments, everything that you wrote back, all of your kind words for the email and for the show, and also the frustration that you expressed for the Hoosiers, which we all felt. And so I think it's important that tonight, we really look at what Indiana did and feel good about it. And so my banner moment tonight to kick things off is just the way Indiana played in the first half, because it didn't start out great. If you think back, Morehead State was up 6-1 in this game. They scored 2 easy buckets on the first 2 possessions, and I know I was kind of thinking, here we go again. But I thought from there, Indiana really picked up the defensive intensity. They went on a huge run in that first half. The first 4 minutes, Morehead State led 8-6, and from there, Indiana won each sequence successively, 13-5, 11-3, 11-3, 9-7, to build their 50-26 halftime lead. And it was keyed with defense. Indiana played hard. I thought they boxed out. I thought they really guarded dribblers well and made it hard for dribblers to do what they wanted to do. They got in passing lanes. They were active with their hands. Everything we've wanted to see from Indiana defensively, we saw in the first half, and that it should give us hope that this is not yet a lost season, because if Indiana can take that intensity to neutral sites, take it on the road against good teams, they can compete and win because of the offense that Indiana has. Now, tonight doesn't show us that. It just shows us that this team can beat a sub-100 opponent at home, and we've seen that before, so we can only get too excited. But coming on the heels of that Duke loss, seeing the communication on defense and the team looking like they knew what they were doing, that's the kind of progress we need to see, and we saw it tonight, and that, to me, is enough to be encouraged on this Saturday night. With that said, let's go around the horn now, get some opening statements, and we'll break the game down further. Mr. Phillips, we will begin with you. Your rant, if there is anything to rant about after tonight's Indiana victory.
I guess my rant is sort of, where is that? Because you're right. Defensively, I mean, they were much better tonight. I mean, look, they're not ever going to be a lockdown, stop everything defensive team. They're never going to do that. But you don't have to do that to win games. You just have to be decent or competent because of how much this offense scored. Sure, and somebody commented on the YouTube video that I was sort of the last of the Duke game, that I was letting them off the hook by saying they didn't need to be a great defensive team. No, look, in a perfect world, you want a great defensive team, and that's obviously the preference, and that's what you aim for. But with this group, you're just not going to get that, so you need to get them as good as they can possibly be. And tonight, look, it wasn't just stopping Morehead. It was the energy, it was the intensity, and it was assignment basketball. They knew where they were supposed to be. They were communicating. If somebody screwed up, somebody helped out, and that guy who got driven by rotated over and helped off his guy. They were forcing people to shoot over. They were forcing the opponent to shoot over them instead of driving by them. I mean, it was complete 180 from the other night. So my question is, what changed? And how can we keep that going? Because even though this was a bad opponent, in quotes, I mean, they're 117 in KenPom. I mean, it's not awful. IU has played much worse teams this year. So that's, a competent basketball team that they just, knocked around. I think that, that was exactly what this team needs to be. If this team plays that kind of defense, it's very dangerous because the offense is always going to be there. And so, yeah. And another thing is that defense creates easy offense the other way. It's almost like a light bulb went off where these guys thought, oh, well, if we play well here, we don't have to work as hard there. And it takes pressure off shots because you're getting easier buckets and you've got a cushion and a lead. And, I mean, it was just a 180 from the other night in effort, intensity, and all that. Maybe it's being at home. Maybe it's knowing they're better than the opponent. But whatever it is, they got to bottle that up and use it.
Agreed. Great points, Ryan. Will, your stat of the night. There's a lot to choose from.
There's so many to choose from. I'm going to just do one on overallness, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the first half. Overall, Morehead State, they are, fourth in the country of giving up points per game, only 54.5. And tonight, what did we score? 92? So, I mean, we almost doubled that tonight. So, definitely a lot of firepower going out tonight in the offense, but definitely aided by that first half, Jared, that you were talking about earlier. In that half, we had 15 total rebounds, 7 on the offensive boards. We're averaging 1.47 points per possession. And then we're also forcing, Morehead State turnovers on 45.7% of their possessions. That's 23 turnovers in one half, and we scored 23 points off those 23 turnovers. So I think that's probably going to be my stat of the game. 23 points on 23 turnovers in that first half to pretty much put that game away before it was even halftime.
Yeah, no, great points. And that's the thing. I think that stat of them only giving up 54.5 points per game is slightly misleading because they're only 65th, I think, somewhere thereabouts, or they were 70th coming in adjusted defensive efficiency. Part of the reason why they give up so few points is they play at one of the slowest paces in the country. But that said, they're still a very good defensive team. There's no question about it. And again, they were giving up 0.98 points per possession. Indiana scores 1.35 tonight, so that's very good. And then defensively, this Morehead State team, not a good offensive team. They're basically middle of the pack in the country, about 186th, with an adjusted offensive efficiency of 101.4 coming in. And Indiana held them to 0.81. And people were saying before the game, what Morehead State player is going to go off and have his career night? Well, none of them, because the Hoosiers played defense tonight, which was nice to see. And this leads me to my question for you, Ryan. And I know that we only have a few minutes with you tonight because USC football apparently is more important than IU in a December game against a subpar opponent. But that's okay. But I want to ask you while you're here, Megan was asking us this on Twitter, and a few people have asked, what will it take for this team to bottle this up and take it on the road, take it to neutral sites? Because we've talked about this, and we've seen, against Creighton, Indiana played pretty good defense. We've seen, I don't think we've seen defense this good this year, but we've seen something approximating it, and yet we go to Maui, we go to Duke, and it's like a totally different team. So what's it going to take for this team to take this on the road?
Well, first of all, I've got a little more time than I think that we, budgeted for with the other thing going on. But no, I think that it's just focus and maturity. I mean, we've all seen Hoosiers. The courts are exactly the same when you go to another arena. It's not different. You just can't get caught up in the atmosphere. You can't let a crowd like Duke's impact how you play. What happens on the court should impact the crowd, not the other way around. And the way to do that is to remain focused on your job, remain focused on defending your guy and communicating with your teammates and helping out and running your offense. The problem is a lot of teams go on the road, and this happens mostly with young teams, and Indiana does have some youth, as Tom Crean has told us repeatedly. But it's on those older guys, those leaders, those upperclassmen, to sort of hold that all together and get them to ignore the things surrounding them and focus on the court. And that's all it is. When you travel a long distance, like to go to Maui, there's absolutely distractions. There's everything that's going to get in your head, and then, oh crap, we got to play a basketball game. And you get out there, and maybe you don't perform your best. That can't happen, and especially on the road in the Big Ten, because we know there are so many difficult arenas to play in. You've got to ignore that other crap surrounding you.
And here's another. I mean, I agree with you completely. And it's going to come down to mental and physical toughness. We haven't seen Indiana go away from Assembly Hall and play with mental and physical toughness since 2013. We just haven't seen it. That team did. That team beat 4 top 25 teams in their buildings in Big Ten play alone that year. And it's because they were tough mentally and physically. And that's what we need to see this Indiana team team do. And part of that comes down to it just being a habit, to that's what you do, to defense not being a switch that you turn on and off, but something that's constant. And that's why, Ryan, I tweeted out in the second half, I think I made a note, because Indiana played really well to start the second half. The Hoosiers opened up the half on a 23-6 run. Really solid run to start the half. But then between the 12-minute and under 8-minute timeout, Morehead went on a 13-2 run. And I thought, okay, Indiana was up 40. The lead's going down a little bit. This is really important now for Indiana, not just to play sloppily through the end of the game, because it's all about habits for this program right now. Because I think Indiana is a team that we see go on great spurts, but then they give up spurts in the other direction. And it's like a seesaw. And for this team, I think to be able to go on the road and play well, defense and toughness have to become a habit. And part of that is just you do it all the time. You don't play defense just for the first 20 minutes because you're coming off a rough game and you focused on it. You play it because you play defense, and that's just part of what you do. And so I thought, and Trenton asked this in the chat, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up now, I thought after that sloppy stretch, Indiana did a nice job of getting it back together. They started playing some defense. I thought Yogi got us back in an offensive flow by being assertive when we were kind of being passive, and he really started to be aggressive, taking the ball to the hoop. We started cleaning up the glass again, and so I was really impressed for about that 5-6 minute stretch, before Priller and all those guys came in, that we seemed to get it back and didn't just let the end of the game just kind of be sloppy and all of that. Can you talk real quick, Ryan, about why those times are important, at the end of games? Because, again, to me, it comes down to habits. And how important is that, do you think, when it comes to winning away from Assembly Hall?
Well, if anyone remembers, Shaq misquoted Aristotle and said, "You are what you continually do, and a great man is built on habits." That's actually not an Aristotle quote. That is a Shaquille O'Neal original, though he thought he was quoting Aristotle. A little education for everybody out there. No, but yeah, that's true, though. You are who you perform as. And if Indiana wants to, got to act like a big-time team, and they've got to perform like a big-time team, they want to play good defense, then go do it. It's not out of their realm of power. I mean, it's all on them. And if they play like this repeatedly, then that's what kind of defensive team they are. And it's on them to do it. I mean, the coaches can harp on it as much. And, yeah, we can talk about coaching and all that stuff for hours, and we have before. But at the same time, the players eventually at some point have to decide to do it or not do it. And it's not incredibly difficult to just make yourself focus for 40 minutes. It really isn't. And these guys have to learn that. And I don't think it's a lack of trying. I don't think it's they go into it saying, oh, whatever, it's cool, we'll just cruise through this. I don't think it's that. I just think they're not realizing what they need to do to make it happen. They don't realize the toughness they need to have to make that happen. And we've seen this with other Crean teams, with the Jordan Hulls teams, all 4 years. Those teams were tough. They played as hard as they could, and they learned throughout those experiences of losing so much what they actually had to go through to be those winning teams. And you feel like sometimes this group just hasn't done that. And maybe that's why you bring in a guy like Derek Elston, and maybe it's going to take time for him to get that message through of how hard you actually have to work to be a top 15 team, to be a top 10 team, to be a team that can challenge for a Big Ten title. Because clearly early in the season, it hasn't looked like this team really knows that. It looks like they're expecting to walk on the floor and just destroy everybody instead of actually go out and do it and create those good habits and play like a team that can blow other teams off the floor.
Yeah, and it was nice to see it today, because I think what a lot of people feared after the Duke game is this team quitting on its coach? Is this team quitting on each other? I mean, that's, if you didn't watch the Duke game for whatever reason, that's how bad it was. Those were legitimate questions running through folks' mind, enough that, from reports, there was a small smattering of boos for when Tom Crean's name was announced tonight. People talking about how it was kind of an uneasy feeling in Assembly Hall, and that's the kind of thing that last year didn't happen until February. This year it's already happening in December. But I can't say it wasn't warranted after that Duke performance. And so I think to see the guys come out, play hard, play together, play focused was really nice. And I think the other thing is it's sometimes hard to play with what looks like 100% effort if you're overthinking, or if maybe you're not even quite buying into what the plan is. And I think Indiana's defensive plan against Duke, such as there was one, certainly didn't look like anything that anybody understood or was buying into. And tonight it was simplified. Indiana played a couple possessions of zone early, but for the most part it was, play man. And they seemed to simplify it, but understand what they were doing better, and rotations were better, and guarding the dribbler was better. And so I think simplifying it, I think, can really help, because then there's not so much thinking, there's not so much, I don't know, whatever's been going on, and maybe that can help too, especially on the road, where when things get tough, you're going to revert to what you're comfortable with and what your habits are. And so I think Indiana needs to simplify it, create better habits, and that will help. Let's talk about some individuals tonight. And both you guys in our little chat here are very excited about Max Bielfeldt, and Max Bielfeldt really played very well. And so, Will, you've got a stat, and Ryan, he was your player of the game. So let's hit those up. Will, you first.
All right. Well, Bielfeldt today was 5 for 5 from the field, and that's the first time that an IU player's been perfect from the field since almost a year ago, actually, just a little bit more, of December 2nd of 2014. That was Emmett Holt against Pitt. So, kudos to him for that. And real quickly, I would like to make a correction on one of my stats earlier. I said that Morehead State had 23 turnovers in the first half. Well, actually, that was for the entire game. Something with the website, it was kind of, it really did. That's why I kind of went with it. But I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I double-checked. It was actually 16. The website wasn't showing me the first half stats, even though I asked it to. But, you can't win them all.
Hey, they were, for a good period of time in the first half, they were turning it over on more than 50% of their possessions, which is insane. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. It was crazy. And Ryan, speak to Max's impact tonight, because you were very impressed with his play.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because he came in early, and it was kind of a back-and-forth game, and he really did that 16-0 run, I think it was, before Morehead scored really early in the first half. And that was completely keyed by him. It was offensive rebounding. It was him getting the ball and just looking like a competent post player, like he could just take it and beat the guys. And he was. I mean, he always has been that. I'm just saying he's not the guy you think of as option number one. They just threw it down to him, and he had a nice turnaround lay-in. He did it again. He had a couple offensive rebounds. He had 3 blocks. I mean, he was just kind of everywhere and was very much a glue guy tonight, sort of in the way we saw Colin Hartman last year early in the season, sort of affect a game in a positive way without putting up, otherworldly numbers. I mean, 12 points, that's his IU high. But, he didn't. It wasn't like he had a double-double or anything, but he went out there and he was just sort of in on every play. He was helping out on defense. Sometimes on offense he would pump fake and kick it out and move the ball. And it just seemed like he had that sort of team-first mentality that you expect from a leader and an older guy. And it really did remind me of, when IU started great last year, what Colin Hartman was doing. Just kind of coming off the bench, giving you a good amount of time in the game and really impacting the game in a positive way on both ends of the floor. And I was really impressed. I do think he was my player of the game. He didn't score as much in the second half. He kind of tapered off. But I think that was more a result of everybody else getting in on the act than him really cooling off.
We got a couple good questions from Candy Stripes in the chat. And if you're listening to the podcast, we do have a chat. If you go to assemblycall.com/live during the live show, it's right over there in the sidebar, so you can watch the show and the chat at the same time. It's been growing and growing. We had a lot of people there for the Duke game, so we really hope that you'll join us in the chat for future shows. And Candy Stripes, we will get to those questions in just a minute. There are a couple guys I wanted to talk about real quick. Troy Williams and Yogi Ferrell. Yogi finished with 15 points, 7 assists, 2 rebounds. As I mentioned, I really thought Yogi did a great job at the end of the second half there, getting the team back in an offensive flow when they had started to struggle. But Yogi also had 4 turnovers, and I thought 3 of them were about the 3 most boneheaded decisions I've seen him make. And for a senior, that's, you don't like seeing that. I mean, one in the first half, he just kind of lazily tossed a pass to Thomas Bryant, who was getting ready to go set a pick. Late in the second half, he threw a really ill-advised pass to Thomas Bryant, who was running the floor, but there was no advantage whatsoever. And again, we talk about habits. I thought last year we did such a good job of curtailing those boneheaded turnovers, but we saw some more of those again tonight. Those by Yogi. There was a pass from Hartman to Robert Johnson that Johnson just fumbled out of bounds, didn't even catch the ball. And again, those are possessions that when you're scoring, 1.35 points per possession in the game and 1.18, 19, whatever their adjusted rate is after this game, you can't give possessions away like that. And so I liked a lot of what Yogi did, liked how he battled on defense, but this team is going to take its cue from its leader, and if he's being careless with the ball, that's going to set a tone that's acceptable. And so I think Yogi really needs to clean that up as we move forward. In terms of Troy, I thought, defensively, I don't think he was good, but he was better. He was active. But what I really like from Troy, he had 16 points, he had 4 boards, he was 6 of 7 from the field. And what we've seen from Troy in the last 2 games, because and against Duke, he did a lot of his work in the second half, but he was still pretty effective early. And tonight is going back to attacking the basket, not worrying so much about showing off his 3-point shot. He's getting back to doing what Troy needs to do, and that's attack the basket and work the baseline. And when he does that, he has these games where he's 6 of 7 from the field and 5 of 6 from the field and 7 for 10 and is really efficient, and that's what we need from Troy Williams. We need more offensive rebounding from him.
Hey,
what?
Don't leave out one turnover for Troy. That was huge.
And that's what I was going to get to too. Is when he was initiating. Now he got bailed out a couple of times by some calls. I thought the refs were pretty generous tonight. I think giving us block calls when they might have been charges, and so I think there's room there for him to clean that up still. But still 1 turnover is good. But I liked what I saw from him tonight. Okay, so let's go to this question real quick, Ryan, and I want to throw this over to you from Candy Stripes. And a couple of, his questions are somewhat related. He talks about, have we seen any improvement in coaching? Let's talk about Coach Crean here, in terms of defensive alignments and what the defensive strategy is. And as a related question, Candy Stripes says it seems like Crean avoids man-to-man against good teams because he thinks we could never guard teams straight up. Man-to-man seems to work from all accounts. I think part of the reason why we go away from the man-to-man sometimes is just because we end up getting in really bad matchups, when teams start to expose Thomas Bryant's inability to defend a pick and roll, when we get in foul trouble and we aren't especially big. Some of those times we go to zone, and we certainly did it against Duke when Crean was very, very worried, perhaps overly worried, about fouling Duke and sending him to the line. But I agree. I think we need to scrap the zone, simplify it, go with man, and just get good at that. Did you notice anything about the man-to-man defense tonight, Ryan, that was better, or was it just simply that it was simpler and guys were buying in more?
It was, honestly, from what I noticed, I just think it was the basic concepts were better. And not from a coaching perspective, but just communication. Forcing a guy to shoot over you instead of drive on you. And because when you force a guy to drive on you, somebody else is going to have to come over and help. That's going to leave somebody else open. If they are at all any good at moving the ball, they're going to find that open man, and then that's going to create an entire shift on the defense. They're going to move the ball around. They're going to find a wide open shooter who, as we saw against Duke, has 15 feet between him and a defender. So the key is guard your man, but don't overcommit, don't overpursue, don't foul, and just kind of make him, make a decision to shoot or drive. And if he's driving, be ready to defend it and keep him in front of you. That's all. It's not that hard, but it's almost like this team tries to be so over-aggressive all the time because of how aggressive they are on offense. They try and translate that to defense, and that's not what you need to do. You need to just be solid. Just don't try and make the spectacular play. Sit back, make them shoot over you. Look, I would have been completely fine if we had let Duke shoot, make 33-pointers the other night. They're going to do that and beat you. You tip your cap, and you walk off the floor. But having them drive consistently and just batter you to the basket and kick out for those open threes is 10 times worse. So that's all it was, it seemed like. And it was really funny because you'd see Crean in timeouts when things were going on and be like, see how easy this? I mean, the look on his face was just like, guys, this is it. This is what we need to do. And, it wasn't like he was surprised, but he was just trying to be emphatic with them, like, this is what I've been asking for, and look how easy the game is when you do this. I mean, if you defend at all, this team will blow all of these non-conference games out. I think that they can destroy Notre Dame if they play like this. And Notre Dame is a very good team. I just think they can't keep up with Indiana's offense, and I think that they can't on a defense like this, they would hold their scoring down. I just think that it's a matter of just buying into the concept of guarding your man, not worrying about everything else, communicating, helping when you're needed, but not over-helping and assuming that the other guy needs help. Just staying solid. That's all they need to do. And it's really not that hard. It's just getting out of that mentality of I need to run around and create havoc and do everything. Just be solid. That's all they need to do defensively.
Yeah, bend your knees, get in a stance, like the fundamental stuff. Use good approach steps so guys don't just drive by you, but you can still contest a shot. I mean, all of those things.
Close out to a shooter under control. Don't run out at him like you're going to block his shot. Close out under control so he doesn't drive right by you. I mean, it's simple stuff that you and I learned in 9th grade, but these guys just haven't been doing. And maybe it's years of conditioning. Maybe it's years of being the most athletic, best player on the floor that you don't have to worry about fundamentals as much. But it's just those solid foundational fundamentals. Getting back to that, it makes the game so much easier. Everything slows down for you. Everything is right in front of you and easy to see. I mean, it's hard to explain, but it's just so simple. And these guys just need to grasp it. If they do, they'll be a very good team. You cannot play defense the way they've been playing defense in the Big Ten and expect to win games and be anything other than a one-and-done team in the tournament.
Hey, did you get the sense from Tom Crean tonight, like he almost seemed kind of like a proud papa, like the way that when guys came off, I mean, there was, when Robert Johnson came off, both of Crean's hands are like around his cheeks and he's up in his face talking to him, and he just, Crean looked to me like a guy that probably has been preaching this stuff for a while, hasn't been able to get it through, and maybe Indiana was humbled by the Duke loss and realized we have to change something. Like there was a relief and just a pride in how Coach looked at the end of the game like, okay, finally these guys are starting to get it, which makes sense based on what we've seen. But
absolutely, I mean, there's no way that Tom Crean wasn't telling these guys what to do. It's a matter of getting through to them, and if you can't get through to them, it doesn't matter what you're teaching them. So that's on the coach as much as anything. So this is not like a defense. What I'm saying is, it seemed like they finally got it tonight. At least from his perspective. Now, who knows? We've seen this team play really well and then dump it the next game. So hopefully this is a building to something and not just a one-off, oh, hey, cool, and then they'll go back to the way they played before. But, yeah, you could definitely see him just sort of like, yes, this is what I've meant, And you look at Crean, I mean, he's a guy who his teams at Marquette were known for aggressive on-ball defense that was fantastic usually, and that was usually predicated on he had big athletic guards. So that was like a hallmark of his teams there. It's never really been the case in Indiana, which is odd because guys, usually things like that translate wherever they go, like they're a hallmark thing. And so it really has been interesting that he hasn't been able to field great defensive teams consistently. So he's clearly in the past preached the right things. I doubt he's completely changed his approach, and I bet he's been preaching these things, but I don't know what it is about the people he's got, with the players, with assistant coaches, like whatever, but it just hasn't been getting through, and it felt like there was finally a breakthrough. Now, again, as I said, there's the caveat. Who knows how it'll turn out next week? But, for tonight, everything seemed to be going well.
By the way, Ryan, your internet connection is drawing some ire on Twitter. Because it's causing you to kind of break up a little bit. So now that you've got your computer, maybe if you don't dial up,
it's always something with you people.
Okay, Will, you have a stat.
Yeah, to me, it's really nice to see how many times we got to the line tonight. 36 times. Previous high for the season was 25. And tonight we actually got to the line 22 times in the first half alone. So it's really nice to see the aggressiveness down low, which obviously led to all those fouls, which got us to the line. And even on top of that, guys, we shot 75% from the line tonight with all those attempts, and we've been averaging about 68% on the season, so definitely an improvement there. And I think that's a testament of, just the play in the post and play down low tonight. And to me, I was looking at the stats here. Would you guys believe me if I would have said we would have scored 92 points and we only went 5 of 15 from deep? I'm happy to see that. I don't think we need to live or die by the three anymore. I think we have other options, and we're starting to see that tonight.
Yeah, it's nice to see. Like you said, Indiana shot 75% from the line, and their free throw rate was 68%, meaning 68. The free throws to field goals, and that's the one area coming into the game that Morehead State was not very good at defensively. Because again, This was a team 6th in forcing turnovers at 26%. Indiana, yet again, kept their turnover percentage under 20, which was good to see. Morehead State, a really good offensive rebounding team coming into the game, 42.6% of their they grabbed 42.6% of their offensive rebounds. Indiana, after a sluggish start where Morehead State was grabbing about 67% of their offensive rebounds through the first 8 minutes, got that down to 34%. So, and then from the free throws, Morehead. So those are Morehead's good stats. Then in terms of free throws, that's the one thing they don't do a great job of, is they're 287th in the country in terms of free throw rate. And so Indiana really took advantage. And that was nice to see because, again, you know, when you look at a game like this, it's not just the final score and the numbers. It's how does that number relate to what the team usually does. And Indiana really dominated Morehead State in all of those different categories, which is what was nice to see because that's what you need to do in games like this. Now, again, it's got to translate to the next, to the next step. Take it on the road, take it into neutral environments. But this is a good step. Ryan, how long do we have you? Do we need to send it over to you for a final thought at any point soon?
I should probably do that now. Look, I think that this was definitely a positive development. Regardless of the name of the school, Morehead is actually a pretty good team, and IU just thoroughly dominated them from about 5 minutes in for a good 35 minutes, I thought. I thought the team played much better defensively. Offense was clicking. As you guys said, the three-pointers, we didn't need them tonight, and that's always a positive. And again, Max Bielfeldt, I think he's been questioned it early on. Like, why do we need that? Why didn't we just recruit another young post guy instead or something like that? I think he's been a great addition, both on and off the floor. And it was his game tonight. I thought he was the player of the game, although other guys had flashier stats and stuff. But yeah, let's just hope this is the beginning of something new and good, as opposed to a blip on the radar. And let's hope that Duke game, maybe that embarrassment really got to the guys, because that was an embarrassing game, and they came out and acquitted themselves well tonight.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, your Trojans can come back here.
Yeah. we'll see about that.
We'll see. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon on another edition. All right. So, and real quick, I'll use this transition moment. You may notice on the assembly call that we don't run ads on the assembly call. We are a show that is entirely listener supported. Both from folks going to the assemblycall.com/Christmas page, where we have 53 of the greatest Christmas gifts for IU fans. A lot of those links are affiliate links, and it helps support the show when you purchase any of those products, because we get paid a small commission. And we also just rely on direct support from our audience. If you go to assemblycall.com/support, you'll see there are lots of different ways to donate and support the show, and just help us with the cost of keeping up the email list and running the chat and all of that stuff, because there are some costs associated with it. And so every little bit helps us to keep this running, which we love doing, and we love taking it to the next level and making it better, as hopefully we have done so far this year. So, Will, you have a stat here, and I want you to say this stat. This is a stat that is going to make some IU fans chuckle. I've already seen Crimson Cast chuckle about this on Twitter. So read the stat, but then I'll give my take on it too.
All right. Well, going with the team's aggressiveness tonight, Tom Crean said that the team had 62 deflections throughout the game. Go ahead.
They did well. What does that stat mean to you? Sorry, I shouldn't steal your thunder.
No, you're fine. I mean, the stat means to me that active hands to me. I mean, for a short answer, to the team's, in the face of the players with the ball, trying to get the steal, trying to get block the pass, block the shot, anything. So to me, it's just aggressiveness and active hands.
Yeah, and that's why that stat has always been a hallmark of Tom Crean teams, and it's been a punchline at certain times, kind of suggesting that Crean looks at a stat like deflections, but look at how bad our rotations are. Look at how unable we are just to handle a dribbler. But, again, I think you take that number, but then you match it with the eye test. And I thought tonight Indiana did a lot of good things defensively, albeit against a team that's not very good on offense. And so, I'll bring another Crimson Cast tweet here. And I don't know if you're watching the show. If you are, we love you. But it says, Crimson Cast analysis, a large margin of victory at home against a team that can't score and won't compete for an at-large bid. True. That is a true statement. And as I said at the start of the halftime show, what we saw tonight was the bully Hoosiers, right? This is kind of becoming a theme that we've seen where the Hoosiers will bully, subpar opponents at home, but it doesn't translate. And frankly, that's all we really saw tonight was that, right? Everything else is a projection for what it could mean going forward. And so, I like to be optimistic. I hate to throw cold water on what are otherwise optimistic proceedings here. But, we wouldn't be doing our job or giving you honest analysis if we just tried to blow smoke and say everything is okay because of this one game. Frankly, Indiana played really well against Creighton, a lot like this, and had which is a better opponent, and had all of us thinking that we're ready for Maui. And what did we do? We went out and laid a complete egg. And then, it looked like in the Alcorn State game, maybe Indiana had made a little bit of progress, and we go out and lay an egg against Duke. And so, again, there's only so much that you can take from a performance like that. But I think the analysis should go a little bit deeper than that, than what Crimson Cast said. And obviously you can only do so much in a tweet. But just because of what we saw, seeming to be more fundamentally sound on defense and being more committed to it, but it's only going to matter if it happens the next 40 minutes against IPFW, and then the 40 minutes after that, and then especially against Notre Dame. So we won't really know what this performance means probably for 3 more games until the Notre Dame game gets here. But again, I think the big benefit of the game tonight is you come back and it gives you something positive, which Indiana needed after that Duke game. It at least, someone said this on Twitter, like this doesn't, correct anything or make everybody feel good, but it kind of lets fans exhale for a couple of days. It at least kind of stems the tide and gives this slight little sliver of hope that, okay, the team hasn't quit. They haven't quit on each other, quit on the coach. Maybe something good can happen here. Will, I want to go through a couple more individuals here before we wrap up. No reason to belabor and go on too long tonight because there's a Big Ten championship game going on right now. But think about a player that you want to talk about. I want to talk about Thomas Bryant, who, I didn't know this, but, Tom Crean, or I didn't know it until Tom Crean talked with Don Fisher in the pregame, but apparently Thomas has been a little bit banged up. Coach Crean wasn't sure how much Thomas was going to play. He ended up starting. He did end up playing a decent amount of minutes. I don't know what the total was. It was probably in the 20 range would be my guess. And he had 14 points, had 6 boards, a couple of turnovers, and the one turnover was a travel on an offensive rebound. I didn't think he was careless with the ball really, but I think the real bonuses were 6 of 7 from the free throw line and 3 offensive rebounds, because Thomas, God love him, it looked like he had butter on his fingers against Duke. There were times I think he had 1 total rebound. Famously, didn't have any in the first half as he and Bielfeldt and Hartman were all shut out. But there were times that he was in position against Duke, and it's like he just couldn't grasp onto the ball. And tonight, I think he showed better hands, better aggressiveness going after the rebounds. Now, this was not a tall front line, but it is a front line that can rebound. And I will reiterate, coming into this game, Morehead State, 4th in the country in offensive rebounding percentage, 20th in defensive rebounding percentage. So for Indiana to come out and win both the offensive and defensive rebounding percentages was a good sign against a team that is a good and an elite level rebounding team based on adjusted percentages. And I thought that to me was the nicest thing to see from Thomas. Is he is a guy, assuming he's going to play 20 to 25 minutes, he should be leading this team in rebounds. He's the tallest guy. He's typically going to be in position. He certainly battles to get himself in position. And so to see him lead the team tonight with his 6 rebounds was a real positive for me, and hopefully something we can see going forward. Mr. DeWitt, any other players' performances that stood out to you tonight?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to talk about Blackman, but I actually want to backtrack a little bit and talk about Bryant, since that's who I was actually going to bring up, but then you kind of stole him from under me. But actually, he didn't have any rebounds, Duke. So it is really nice to see him come back and, in a sense, rebound, no pun intended, tonight with the 6. And he only had the 4 points last game. And so for him to come out tonight, score 14, perfect from the field, only missed 1 free throw, I thought it was a very good bounce back effort by him today. And I think that hopefully he can grow on it. And I think he loves to play in Assembly Hall. I really see his passion more and more when he's playing in the hall. And I love to see it because he gets the crowd fired up. He gets me fired up here in my living room. I love it. Can't wait to go see him play sometime live. But talking about Blackman, he had 15 points today, only 5 from 13. So, after that huge porous game last week, he's still been struggling from the field. So he's back down in the cold end. Hopefully he can heat up. But even though he struggled from the field tonight, I liked his defensive effort tonight. I don't know about you. I mean, we know how he struggles, but again, he had a lot of active hands tonight. He was always in good position. Okay, I want to say always, but tended to be position more often than not, more often than we're used to from him. So I was intrigued by his defensive play tonight, and I hope he can build on that, because if he can play defense, it's just going to make him an overall better player, and I think it's going to help his offensive game as well.
Yeah, in fact, one of my favorite sequences from the game came in the first half where James overplayed a passing lane, got a deflection, it went to the other end of the court, and he sprinted after it. He ended up getting a foul, but it was nice to see him just compete, not give up on the play, be in good position on defense. You know, when we talk about at the end of the game, you know, continuing to play defense and habits and doing it consistently, you know, the two guys that you're really looking at there are James and Troy, who tend to be our two most inconsistent defenders. And I thought we saw some of that from James tonight, where he was really locked in the first half. When Indiana had that lull in the second half, you know, I didn't think he was playing particularly good defense, not that anyone was. But he's a guy that you'll see the spurts of defense, and you're totally right. Now we've got to see it consistently. I mean, remember him in the Big Ten tournament last year against Northwestern in that first game? I mean, he played like an All-American in that game. And then the next game against Maryland, the defense just wasn't there anymore. And that kind of up and down is what we've seen. I mean, if you looked at the film session that Inside the Hall did on the Duke game, you know, there are times where James just didn't even seem like he knew where he was supposed to be. That plagued a lot of guys in that game. But tonight, much more aggressive. I think you're right. We've got to see that from him. Another guy I want to talk about. Oh, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to point out, go back to something Ryan said earlier. With it, I think it's especially true here. I think it all just depends on his focus and his effort, just like the whole team in general. I think he's not alone there, but definitely for him too. Focus and effort is the only thing I think that's lacking for him.
Yeah, and let's talk about Robert Johnson, because, you know, he's a guy we got to be careful with. Robert Johnson, because a lot like Victor Oladipo's sophomore year, the first year that we did the show, you know, when he wasn't scoring as much, you know, sometimes his contributions, they don't jump out at you on the box score, you know, like Troy Williams does, where he's up at the top with his 16 points and his 4 boards. But Robert's contributions are more subtle. And I will say, on the Inside the Hall premium forum, and if you're not part of that, go to forum.insidethehall.com. Highly recommended. It's $30-some, some of the best $30 that I spend all year. It's really great, smart, measured, not too crazy IU fan discussion, the Inside the Hall forum. But Alex Bojec will drop a lot of nuggets in there. And one of the nuggets that he dropped this week, hope he doesn't mind me saying this publicly, but was that, you know, I think he termed it as the person that he trusts the most about IU, said that Robert Johnson is this team's best player on both ends of the court, their best two-way player. And there's a lot of truth to that. You know, Robert still has to get better, you know, at not turning the ball over, making better passes, better decisions on offense. But when you consider the contributions that he makes on the defensive end of the floor, and I thought tonight he started, and I thought he played really good defense from the get-go, was aggressive, you know, down in his stance, you know, overplaying passing lanes, did a really nice job. And I thought Hartman the same thing. You know, Hartman, again, you know, only the 4 points, but was consistently in the right spot, making smart rotations, you know, not letting guys just have easy access to the bucket. And that's the kind of stuff you kind of wish you could take for granted and didn't need to come on the show and kind of laud, but it's important. And I thought both of those guys did it tonight. Well, Mr. DeWitt, anything else that jumped out to you about this game before we head to final thoughts?
Just one more quick observation that I haven't been able to squeeze out. Actually, I'll make it 2. One, you discussed a little bit how, bless you, by the way, you discussed how Morehead State, you know, they are one of the slowest teams, you know, in terms of possession. They like to really hold in that ball. Well, I mean, they kind of went to the, you know, against them earlier on in the first half. We forced, 3 shot clock violations, which was, I mean, that was good to see. Like to see the defensive pressure there. And then one more thing on defense I noticed, I thought was definitely, I thought I saw more communication on that end of the floor than I definitely saw against Duke. And I thought that was a big reason why we saw the big shift on that side of the ball tonight, because I thought I saw guys communicating more, either verbally or non-verbally, just pointing, you know, out just to tell the other guy where to go. I thought that was a great improvement compared to the Duke game.
Hey, and Will, for those of you who are new to the audience, Will actually started with the show last year as our student intern and now has taken on a full-time role with the show. What's your Twitter handle for people who may not be following you yet?
Should be here on my lower third when I talk, but it is at Will DeWitt 11, but the 2 L's in my will is actually 2 1s because I'm fancy like that, and 11 is my lucky number. So yeah, it's at WI11 DeWitt.
Just remember, there's more people who listen to the podcast than live, so they can't see the Twitter handle on there. So that's why we always have to say it out loud for our beloved podcast listeners. We especially love the people who come live after the games. You are the diehards. You are the lifeblood, the heart of the assembly call. We love you, but we also want to show love to our podcast listeners as well, because you guys are wonderful too. All right, let's do some final thoughts, and let's go watch the Big Ten championship game. Your final thought, Will, and then I'll close it up.
Sure. My final thoughts tonight. Just glad to have this bounce back win. If even if they won the game tonight in close fashion, I think we still would have been positive. But for them to come out and to just dominate after trailing by like 5 minutes in the first half, and then something clicked and they decided to play, and then they did well. So if they can do this, like we talked about earlier, if they can do this for the next game, the next game, and just kind of have that snowball effect, I think that they can build a lot of confidence headed into Big Ten play, and I don't think it's really any reason for us to lose all hope yet. So I'm going to say that, we're all pretty down after the Duke game, but I don't want to get overly optimistic again, but I'm going to say that I'm still optimistic that there's still plenty of time. It's only, December 5th? As Tom Crean would say, it's only December 5th. So plenty of time to turn this ship around.
Yeah, what you said right there, that may end up being the headline of this post, of the blog post for this, which is basically, hey, at least we don't have to lose all hope. That's why this game was important. Again, coming off that Duke debacle, a lot of us feared that the team was quitting on each other, quitting on the coach, because that's what it looked like. And you don't come out and beat the 117th ranked team in KenPom that, let's remember, just went on the road to St. Louis and beat them 60-46. Like, on the pregame show, and I started doing a pregame Periscope. If you follow us at Assembly Call, you can get notifications of that. Usually do it about 15 minutes before the game. I said, don't be surprised if this is a game that is, an 8 to 10 to 12-point game. KenPom only predicted a 12-point victory, and Indiana came out and won by 30-some points, 33 points, 92-59. That's impressive. And, we can only take so much from it, but that's probably what we can take from it is, okay, there is still a heartbeat to this team. There is still something here. Are we way behind the 8 ball now, much more than we thought with our 3 losses and with the strength of schedule not being as good and only one more opportunity to get a good win? Yes. So the season hasn't started off like we like, but hey, as several people have talked about, the 1981 team, for example, started out really poorly and ended up turning it around and getting going. Now, this team doesn't have an Isaiah. They don't have, obviously, we don't expect that same kind of turnaround. But it does show that who you are early in the season isn't necessarily who you are in February and March. Sadly, too often for this program, we've been better in, say, early January than we've been in February and March. But that's, I think, what we can take from this game is maybe a light bulb went off and this team went on, and this team says, hey, okay, this is what happens when we play defense. Now, we've said that before. We said it last year, and it never fully materialized consistently. And we've even said it already at a couple of points this year, and it hasn't been consistent. So we won't know anything until this team goes on the road, plays at a neutral site. But my biggest fear tonight was that Indiana would come out, have a hangover, not play well, either squeak out a close victory that was unimpressive or, heaven forbid, lose at home. And then everything just would have turned so negative that it would have been really hard to recover. But coming back, getting a blowout win that you can feel good about, it's the absolute best you could hope for from these 40 minutes. Nothing that happened tonight was going to erase Duke or Maui. So, there's just no reason to hope for that and no reason to denigrate this win simply because it could only do so much. The Hoosiers did as much as they could do tonight. Let's be happy about it. Let's, have that little sliver of hope that maybe they figured something out on defense and we move on to IPFW. And then I think one more warm-up game before Notre Dame. Let's do a quick schedule review. So the IPFW game is Wednesday, December 9th. That game is not on the Big Ten Network. It is BTN+. And then it's McNeese State, Saturday the 12th. And then the following Saturday, there's a whole week there where Indiana doesn't play. The following Saturday is Notre Dame. So these next 2 games are really for Indiana to get warmed up for that Notre Dame game. And hopefully Indiana can play defense for the next 80 minutes like they played for about 33 minutes tonight. And if they can, then Indiana should set themselves up to get the win that they need against Notre Dame. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's put one foot in front of the other. Today, Indiana put a positive foot out, got a victory, and let's all be happy about that. Thank you very much for watching live tonight. Thank you very much for listening on the podcast. We will be back Wednesday night after Indiana IPFW. And just to give you a quick preview of IPFW, they are 184th in Ken Palm right now. Currently, Indiana's predicted to have an 86-69 victory, 93% chance of victory. So an even wider margin of victory predicted for that one than Morehead State. But that will require tonight's Indiana coming to play on Wednesday night. Let's hope they do. We will talk to you after that game. See you then, everybody.